Thanks for downloading Tech Tent from the BBC World Service. Find out more about us at bbcworldservice.com/techtent. Hello and welcome to Tech Tent, your weekly guide to the hottest stories and trends from the technology world. I'm Rory Catalan-Jones, and this week, no, 5G does not have a link to the coronavirus, and Bill Gates is not running a devilish plot to implant chips in everyone. We look at the tidal wave of conspiracy theories and other misinformation and find out how they are spread on social media. We'll hear from a member of Facebook's new Supreme Court, its oversight board. Will it be up and running in time to deal with misinformation around the US election? And you can't keep Elon Musk out of the headlines. He's promising that better batteries will soon produce a cheaper Tesla electric car. Joining me this week is BBC technology reporter Jane Wakefield. Hi Jane, what's been keeping you busy?
So although I've been stuck in my kitchen, I've been travelling the world this week, including off to Australia for a story and one about the dark web as well.
Oh, we'll find out more later. Here's a taste of what's coming up.
Everyone was in their cars, in their Teslas, and whenever Elon Musk would say literally anything, they would start beeping their horns.
We have signed on to this task only because of the transparency and independence and the obligation from Facebook, including, of course, Mark Zuckerberg, to follow our decisions. So that is a red line for us.
Now, it's the great theme of this year, misinformation spread on social media about the coronavirus, about technology such as 5G, and about politics and elections. And there's plenty of evidence that the likes of Facebook, YouTube and Twitter are struggling to cope with what's been called an infodemic. Well, luckily, the BBC has its own misinformation reporter, Marianna Spring, to keep an eye on all of this. She's with us. You've been busy, Marianna.
Very, very busy. There's been a great deal of misinformation and conspiracy theories spreading online around coronavirus, specifically talking about where it came from, talking about whether it's real, and also talking about vaccines, which are the big topic in the months ahead. Could a vaccine be a way of Bill Gates microchipping and killing us? And the answer is no.
No. Well, we're going to get two particular angles on misinformation and get Marianna's take on them. First, how is this stuff spread? YouTube has long been a platform where you can fall down a rabbit hole watching one conspiracy theory video after another. But a study from the Oxford Internet Institute suggests that it's the way those videos are shared on Facebook which may be the real problem. Alexi Knutler from the Institute explained what they discovered.
We found around 8,000 videos that YouTube had removed because they believed that they contained false information. Claims such as unscientific claims about treatments, coronavirus treatments, or making false claims about the threat of the virus. And we also found that these videos had gathered a fairly large audience. So they had been shared around 20 million times on social media. And it's a little bit hard to visualize what that number means. So for instance, the YouTube videos of Fox News gathered around 10 million shares in the same period during the pandemic. So the audience of these misinformation videos was twice the audience of Fox News YouTube videos.
And although they're originating on YouTube, it seems Facebook is an extraordinarily powerful distribution platform for them. Is that right?
Yeah, so we found evidence that it was specifically Facebook that was responsible for the distribution of these videos. So one thing that YouTube has worked on is that they've changed their algorithm so that people who search for information on YouTube or the recommendations that YouTube give, they elevate authoritative sources of information, such as health authorities. However, the misinformation videos were widely shared on Facebook. And our research suggests that that's the primary explanation why they found such a large audience. And we also found that Facebook's operations for stopping misinformation did not work very well in this case. One thing that Facebook does is that they They operate a fact-checking network of third-party fact-checkers that are supposed to place warning labels on content that has misinformation, but only less than 1% of these misinformation videos from YouTube had such labels placed on them. So the scale of Facebook's operation doesn't seem to be sufficient for catching these videos.
Alexei Knutler. Mariana, what's your experience been of where these theories spread? What are the prime methods?
One thing we often find is that misinformation starts to thrive in closed spaces, often on Facebook groups, particularly those that are concentrated around conspiracy theories or at the moment around coronavirus. And then that disinformation begins to spill out into other spaces, local Facebook groups, parent group chats, Instagram stories of celebrities. And I think it is really important to emphasize how misinformation is not limited to a single platform. I guess the charm of and the downside of the internet is that everything can spread from one platform to another. And so we frequently find that the videos of pseudoscientists that are initially posted on YouTube and share misleading or false claims about the pandemic are then reposted in big conspiracy theory Facebook groups, which have thousands of members, and then one member of those one of those groups will share it on their Facebook feed. Their Facebook friends see it, and then perhaps they share it on their Instagram story, or it begins to permeate other spaces. And that makes the issue of tackling misinformation and conspiracy theories all the more difficult because it's not contained in that way.
Now, one area where there's been a lot of misinformation is about the new 5G mobile phone networks. Wild claims have been made about their potential impact on health. Connections have even been made with the coronavirus. The consultancy Deloitte has been finding out what impact that has had and whether people actually believe these falsehoods. Paul Lee from Deloitte told me what they'd found.
There are significant proportions of the population in many markets which make in our view, false conflation between 5G and there being a health risk. So if I look at Europe, one of the countries with the highest degree of understanding is actually the UK, but it's still 14% of the population believe that 5G has a negative health impact. And in some other markets, such as Austria, over a third of the population believes there is an impact on health. And what we also see is amongst younger age groups, that belief is higher. So if I look at the UK, it's 18% of 25 to 34-year-olds.
And why do you think that is? Is this to do with all these conspiracy theories that we've been seeing floating around?
I think part of this is just a constant fear of new technologies. And we had worries about 4G, about 3G, and also about this technology called Tetra. But with 5G, there are degrees of discomfort that I've never seen before. And I think partly what's happened is there is far more ability to share misinformation. There is far more misinformation about, enabled partly by social media. And also with COVID-19, people are scared and they're looking for explanations to try and rationalize what's happening.
That's Paul Lee of Deloitte. So the slightly worrying thing, Mariana, is that we sometimes think, oh, these people are in a corner talking to themselves. Actually, this stuff has an impact on what lots of people believe. You've been looking at one particular crazy conspiracy theory. It's called QAnon. What's that, and do people actually believe it?
Yep. So QAnon is an unfounded conspiracy theory that suggests President Trump is fighting a secret war against satanic paedophiles in government, business, and the media. And it has a lot of hardcore supporters who spread other political disinformation, usually targeting opponents of the US president. But it's not just something that's spread in the US. I went to protests recently where people here in London were promoting disinformation that's plugged by QAnon. And a lady looked me dead in the eye and said to me, right now, under our feet, there are babies waiting in the tunnels to be eaten by Prince Charles. And that in itself conveys to you the extremity of this conspiracy theory.
Yeah, well, one shouldn't laugh. It's having a serious impact. Thank you very much, Mariona Spring. You're doing great work there. By the way, we asked Facebook about these issues. They told us they did not allow harmful misinformation on their platforms and had removed 7 million pieces of such misinformation about COVID-19 over the space of just 3 months. And later in the programme, we hear from a member of Facebook's new oversight board about what it'll do about this and other issues. Now, let's have a look at some of the week's other big tech stories with Jane Wakefield. Jane, a huge raid on dark web marketplaces. What are they and what's happened?
So the dark web is a part of the internet that can only be reached with specialised software, and it has long been seen as a hiding place for criminal gangs. But this week, police in Europe and the US announced that they had joined forces for an investigation into these marketplaces, and in a coordinated raid, 179 people had been arrested, $6.5 million worth of cash and virtual currency seized, along with 500 kilograms of drugs and 64 guns. And the police were hailing this as a major breakthrough. It's long wanted to be able to get its grip on the dark web, and it was saying now that it's no longer a hidden place and the golden age of underground marketplaces is over. Although it is likely that the people that use these and set up these marketplaces will have a counter to this, perhaps going even deeper, more anonymous, more security. So I don't think the battle is over yet.
No, we've heard before that they've exposed the dark web, closed things down, and they've come back. After a long gestation, there's finally a contact tracing app in England and Wales for you and me, Jane. It's launched this week. Have you got it yet?
I haven't. I know you have, and I must get it very soon. And of course, we're joining a host of other nations that have this track and trace app, and it will notify you if you've been in contact with someone who has later tested positive for the virus, and it will also advise you to self-isolate if that is the case, and it will let you easily scan those QR codes that are becoming mandatory at venues like pubs and restaurants. We've seen other countries roll these apps out in Germany, France, India. And of course, the really key question here is how many people download them and use them. And of course, we're at our very early stages yet, but I'm sure the government will be hoping it will be huge numbers. We shall see.
Yeah, some places have got up to about 20-30%, which is really good. But others, France notably, tiny number, downloaded its app. And finally, there are all sorts of places around the real world where you're not allowed to go walking. Now there's a ban happening in the virtual world. What's that about?
So Google has removed images on its Street View service that allow people to virtually walk to the summit of Uluru in Australia's Northern Territory. Now, last year, real walks on the monolith, which was formerly known as Ayers Rock, were banned at the request of the indigenous people to whom it was returned in 1985. And now Parks Australia has alerted Google to some images that recreate the walk that you could do up it. It seems that these images predated the ban, but Google has acknowledged that the place is deeply sacred and has heard the concerns and removed them. So you can no longer even walk virtually on Uluru.
Wonder whether there'll be further ban on virtual walking in all sorts of places around the world. You're listening to Tech Tent from the BBC World Service with Rory Cellan-Jones. In a moment, we meet the former Prime Minister of Denmark with a big role in governing Facebook. Now, you just can't keep him out of the news. Earlier this week, Tesla boss Elon Musk made a big promise during a keynote speech with a difference.
We're confident that long-term we can design and manufacture a compelling $25,000 electric vehicle. This has always been our dream from the beginning of the company.
That was him addressing Tesla shareholders during the company's so-called Battery Day. Our San Francisco-based technology reporter James Clayton, and yes, he has now finally made it to San Francisco, described the event to me.
Okay, so Elon Musk is on stage, and rather than there being a load of people actually physically there sitting down in an auditorium, it was open air, like a drive-in cinema in a way, where everyone was in their cars, in their Teslas, And whenever Elon Musk would say literally anything, they would start like beeping their horns with approval. So like a very bizarre way to hold a presentation, I guess.
And there was a lot of expectation. There was a lot of build-up to Battery Day, as it was called. Did we learn an awful lot about huge advances in battery technology?
I think the whole part of the presentation was like incremental gains and trying to get as much sort of juice and efficiency out of technology that kind of already exists. The thing that caught my eye, I guess, was when he was talking about how literally the physical makeup of the car, like the actual frame of the car, could potentially be part of the battery. And what he was saying was, in airplanes, there used to just be a fuel tank until they worked out that the wings could basically be designed so that the fuel tank was actually the same shape as the wings, and that massively improved efficiency. And so the idea that the battery doesn't have to just be a big kind of solid block was kind of quite interesting to me. But the markets weren't massive fans. A lot of people on Twitter, there's a lot of like Tesla fans out there who were like, this is incredible. Tesla are going to be ahead of the competition for years to come. Just, at the same time, I think 50 billion was knocked off the share price for Tesla. So a lot of people weren't as impressed as some of the people honking their horns were.
He's made all sorts of extraordinary predictions over the years, particularly about how quickly autonomous driving will come through. Were there more of those predictions?
Yes, there were. I mean, for one, he announced that he thought that there would be a $25,000 fully autonomous Tesla on the market in about 3 years, which is a pretty, it's quite the claim. And let's see whether that actually happens. But he also announced a beta version of full autopilot, which would come out in the next couple of months. He previously said that autopilot, basically full level automated driving, would be ready and available at the end of this year. So it'll be interesting to see when that beta version is released, how good it is. But I know a lot of sort of industry experts are skeptical.
There's a permanent push-me-pull-you situation here, isn't there? There are years when everyone doubts Elon Musk, and then there are years when everybody thinks he can do no wrong. And at the moment, the share price, whatever the recent movements, is quite extraordinary. It says his company is the biggest, most valuable car company in the world. It says he's a genius.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that the market thinks electric vehicles is the future, and Tesla is the world leader in electric vehicles. And I think it's kind of as simple as that. So, as long as people think this is the future, as long as Tesla have a market lead, it's going to continue to do well.
James Clayton in San Francisco. So, Jane Wakefield, we've heard a lot of big talk over the past few years from Elon Musk. Are you a believer or are you a skeptic?
Well, I have to say that only Elon Musk could have something called a battery day and get kind of international attention for it. So, you have to put your hands up to him for that. But I think the event proved that battery tech is hard. I mean, the challenge of making them both more energy efficient and powerful at the same time is something that even he acknowledges could take years. I did find it funny that he talked about his dream being an affordable electric, fully automated Tesla in 3 years' time with a price tag of $25,000. I mean, I just hope if Elon Musk ever visits the BBC, they don't send me and my beat up Citroen Picasso to pick him up, because let's just say I don't think he'd be impressed.
I have to say, $25,000 is apparently the average price of a car sold in the US, a new car sold in the US now. So it is relatively affordable. But he has made that kind of promise before, and they quite often end up being put back a year or two. Now, it was nearly 2 years ago that Facebook's boss, Mark Zuckerberg, first floated the idea of an independent body, a kind of supreme court, which would make final decisions about what is and is not allowed on the platform. The members of the Oversight Board were announced in May this year, but it won't start ruling on cases until mid-October. Of course, that's just before the US presidential election takes place, which is bound to raise all sorts of issues for the social media firm. Our Tech Desk editor, Leo Kellyan, has been talking to a co-chair of the board, the former Danish Prime Minister, Helle Thorning-Schmidt. He asked her whether it was really going to have an impact on the election.
Well, we'll have to wait and see which cases are brought before in front of the board, and we will have to see if Facebook refers any cases to us, or whether there are any users that refer cases to us. But in principle, we will be able to look at issues arising around posts connected to the election and also after the election. But don't forget that we are preferring, particularly in the beginning, to have real deliberation and principled debate around our decisions. We're not here to have snap opinions about things. We are here to take principled decisions that Facebook has to follow. You shouldn't expect us, if Facebook does something right after the election, take something down or leave something up. There won't be a ruling the day after from the oversight board, because that's not why we're here. We're here to take principled decisions and deliberate properly, and also listen to third parties when we take decisions.
I know in theory the board has the right to overrule even Mark Zuckerberg himself, but bearing in mind he still controls the majority of the voting shares in Facebook, and he could come under pressure from politicians from the left or the right or other powerful interest groups. Isn't there a risk that he in turn can overrule whatever you decide?
If Facebook doesn't follow our decisions, it won't last very long, because we have signed on to this task only because of the transparency and independence and the obligation from Facebook, including, of course, Mark Zuckerberg, to follow our decisions. So that is a red line for us.
Helle Thorning-Schmidt talking to Leo Kelly. Jane Wakefield, is it fair to say not everyone is convinced that this body is going to be effective?
I think that would be very fair to say, yeah, but it is yet to be tested. I think it's really interesting, actually, that the US Supreme Court has been making the headlines in recent weeks because of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I don't think anybody would doubt that that court has made its important decisions, maybe not particularly quickly, but decisions that have really impacted society. And I think that this is an opportunity for Facebook to prove that it can do the same with its Supreme Court. And with 2.7 billion users, content on the internet is perhaps one of the biggest issues sort of facing us all. So I think they do need to be given a chance. The board themselves have said, give us 2 years and see what we come up with. And the timing, like you say, is really interesting. Will their first case be one related to the election? It's going to be a really interesting one to watch, I think.
And they're going to be buffeted from both left and right. Already complaints that it's too liberal, and other complaints that it won't be effective in cracking down on things like hate speech and misinformation. That's all for this week. Thanks to my BBC colleagues Jane Wakefield, Mariana Spring, Leo Kellyan and James Clayton. Remember, you can get all of their stories and mine at bbc.com/technology. And don't forget to join us again in the Tech Tent at the same time next week.